Good morning, members, and welcome to the February meeting of the Economy and Resources Committee. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through our Council's website. Can I remind members to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off video when you are not addressing the meeting, please. Those of you attending virtually who wish to contribute to any item should write speak in the Teams chat function, and you will be invited to speak in order about new issues. Should your question or issue be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so that we deal with the business as efficiently as possible. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by a roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you please to either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time, or alternatively, write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you are able to rejoin the meeting. This is required to allow us to record member presence, and please do not use the chat function for any contributions that are material to debates. We have several important reports to consider today, and I anticipate we will deal with business in our usual efficient manner. Before I embark on the agenda, I've had a request to bring item 10 forward in the running order, which I am happy to agree to, clearly on the proviso that the officers who would be speaking to that are available in order to do so. I will await confirmation of that once we have completed the declarations of interest and the note, the minute of the last meeting. And if we are able just to proceed with item 10, then I'll take that immediately after we have covered the note of the last meeting, and then revert to the previous running order. I think Claire is just checking on officer availability now, so I will await notice of that. However, while that is happening, item 1 is Sedrant apologies and Chair's approval of members' remote participation. Claire, can you provide the Sedrant and any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm aware of one apology this morning from Councillor McComb. For the benefit of members on Teams, we have 3 members present in the hall this morning, being Councillors Nicholson, Sloan and Thompson. Currently, Councillors Fairbairn, Giusti and Johnston not present. All other members present on Teams.
Councillor Johnston's an apology, Claire.
Thanks, Ian. We will note that. So I'll then move to declarations of interest, please. Do any members wish to make a declaration of interest with respect to the items on the agenda this morning? Councillor Haddon. Katie.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Yes, it's not necessarily a declaration of interest, but it's just clarity really on item 10. There's reference on page 80 to the Whitthorn Trust, and also again on page 110, which references the Whitthorn Trust as a sister to the All Roads Lead to Whitthorn organisation. It's just to clarify that the Whitthorn Trust and All Roads Lead to Whitthorn are 2 separate and distinct organisations. I am a director on the Whitthorn Trust, and certainly I have no involvement in All Roads Lead to Whitthorn. They have separate charity numbers, they have separate directors. I believe there's a separate list of people involved registered with Companies House. So I just want to make sure that that distinction is in fact made, because there is confusion even in Whitthorn as to the conjoining of these 2 organisations. So while it is not a declaration that I'm involved with the All Roads Lead to Whitthorn organisation, it's just to distinctly sort of almost make that distinction clear to the committee that the Whitthorn Trust is not a member or part of the All Roads Lead to Whitthorn. So therefore I will remain as part of the discussion on item 10. Thank you.
Katie, thanks for the clarification, and certainly we'll come back to that at item 10, which may, as I say, be sooner than members would have anticipated. I will check in case there are any other declarations of interest. Take it therefore that there are not. Item 3 is a minute of the previous meeting of 16th November 2021. Are we content to note that minute, please?
Noted.
Thank you. Claire, can I check that we can move straight to item 10 and then return to the running order?
Okay, yes, thank you, Chair. But I've been advised that the officers are Simon Fieldhouse is certainly one to call.
Okay, so in that case, I have received a request that we bring item 10 forward in the agenda, which I'm happy to agree to. So we will go straight to item 10 and then return to the normal running order after that item is concluded. And appreciate officers' flexibility in allowing us to do that. So item 10 is the Economic Development Capital Programme Monitoring Update Report for Q3. And the report is by Head of Economy and Development. The report provides us with an update on the Economic Development Asset Class Programme to November 2021. Also updates us on a range of specific projects, including our CGF submissions. It also seeks our consideration of recommendations for funding to support a range of projects. The report now also includes updates on the Countryside and Biodiversity Programme, which was transferred from the Land Asset Class in 2021. Simon Fieldhouse, Melissa McGarry and Pam Taylor are here to assist if members have any questions. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for your flexibility. As I say, much appreciated. Is there anything that you wish to add to the report before we go to members' questions, please?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Simon, thanks very much. In that case, we will go straight to members' questions.
Chair.
Councillor Sloan.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for accommodating me bringing this forward. The item 10, it covers a breadth, as Katie just said, from the Whittington Trust and Whittington programmes. And it's good to see that the good money is going into places like Whittington. But I'm still despairing a bit when I come down to the former George Hotel. Somebody like, I was talking to you yesterday, I was standing outside it, if they ever want to make a film about the Blitz in London, they've got a perfect building there just to show it. It is an absolute disgrace, and we still are no further forward. We asked before and were told by a previous chief executive that there would be a project officer put in place for this project to deal particularly, not spread all over the region. It's far too important to be spread all over the region. So I would ask that this committee asks the chief executive, yet again, I don't see any reason why he would turn it down, for a project officer to move Stranraer along. I certainly, on and off, I've been 30 years in this council, and how would you like to leave in May and the George Hotel still standing there? Well, something tells me it will be. So if the group we have met with the group of officers who are dealing with it in Stranraer, and a good meeting was had. We have put through to them a paper that came in 12 years ago. It was delivered on 12 years and is laying a shelf, probably gathering dust. Now this paper, while it's 10 years old, it's more than 10 years old, it is convises of what exactly is going on just now. The same solutions are needed now that was needed then. The only thing is we didn't get them then. I just want to make sure we get them this time, and we can get them in a reasonable time form, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sloan. I'll turn to Melissa and Simon, see if they have any comment on what you have said.
Thank you, Chair. I'll let Melissa come in on a point of detail. But yes, we recognise, and obviously we've had discussions, obviously with members within the Stranraer area, and we have there the report, as Councillor Sloan has referenced. We're working through things, and maybe Melissa can come in with a bit of the detail in terms of where we are at this moment in time, Chair.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Melissa?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the position that we're at is that we actually have a team of officers now supporting a number of projects in Stranraer. That's the way we're bringing in the approach to Stranraer to make sure Stranraer regeneration, which is a priority for our council, is addressed well, and that there is a team of people and a team of expertise, not just within the project development team, but across our council, supporting the various projects that are being brought forward. So we feel that places the prospects for supporting and bringing investment to Stranraer projects in a much stronger footing. In terms of the paper that's 12 years old, yeah, that's been shared with us, and yes, it's been very useful and is contributing to the development of a solution for the George Hotel, albeit that the paper did refer to a different building, but certainly there was lots of really good, helpful ideas in that, and that is informing the work that we're now taking forward to develop the end-use solution and bring investment to George Hotel. Thank you.
Chair, could I come back?
Yes.
It's just, I mean, you'll notice maybe from some of the stuff that I sent through on the email that the general public is actually sending us ideas of what the George Hotel could ideally be. Now, I think these should be investigated by the officers, all of them. And I still look to a possibility for a culture centre. That might sound like a contradiction, but I think it would be well needed. So I still believe we need this lead officer. One person who heads up the whole raft of regeneration within the Stranraer-Whittington area. I don't think that's too much to ask for Stranraer. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Tommy. Melissa, can you just refresh my memory on consultation and engagement, please? I do think it's an important point.
Yes, absolutely happy to. So what we're doing now is that we are doing, we're undertaking a programme of stakeholder engagement, and that is around the offer that has been set out in the paper before you today. So we've been having discussions with key stakeholders, the Stranraer Development Trust, the CPIATS group, the SMART group. We've spoken to the Furniture Project, we've spoken to the college. There's a number of different organisations that we're working with. We're also bringing forward proposals to the next meeting of this committee that sets out in a bit more detail the wider community engagement that we want to do and what the timetable is for doing that as well. So we are now moving at pace on this. And we're speaking to the relevant groups, community groups, third sector, other organisations, specialist arts groups as well around the cultural centre offer, so that when we bring forward the costed proposals, that there has been a process of robust engagement and consultation supporting that work.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. I think that.
Chair, one more time.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, I listen to what Liz is saying, and where I will disagree with her is when she talks about it's moving along at pace. It is certainly, nothing's moving along at pace. And I would argue that. I do realise it wasn't Liz and her team of people who are in charge of this project and have not brought this project to its knees the way it is. That was done by others who thankfully are no longer with this council. But I think when we talk about pace, it's got to be real pace.
Okay, noted. Thank you, Tommy. I take, when I look at 3.11 in the context of some of the projects I've been involved with in the past, a single phase construction project in 23-24, perhaps into 24-25, in the term of a council, that's not far away. In all honesty, I have certainly been involved with projects that have taken a lot longer to secure funding and get over the line, and are now, in fairness, very successful in important parts of their communities. Don't particularly want to rake over old coals, but I'm about to say most of the enthusiasts for acquiring this building by the council back in the day are no longer either members or officers of the council. Had there been a clear plan in place at that point, we wouldn't have got to this situation. Our officers are making the best of a really bad job. I think it is fair to say, and have at the very least stabilised the building so that it doesn't pose a threat to the public, which is an important starting point, although I'd be the first to admit it does indeed look like it's a remnant from the Blitz. The plan is not that it remains like that ad infinitum. What has been set out at 311, if it can be achieved, will be one of the quicker turnarounds that I've certainly encountered in my experience. I do recognise other colleagues will disagree, and everyone is right.
Yeah, it's just that I think the pyramids were built quicker than what they've done the George Hotel.
Noted. I have a list of speakers waiting to come in. I'll go on to Councillor Thompson. Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. I think Councillor Hageman might have been first, but I'll just come in anyway. It was actually on the back of her point about the Whitthorn Trust. So it was really just, do we need to correct the recommendation at 2.5 where it says all roads lead to Whitthorn Trust? I think when I read that, I just assumed that might have been an actual group, but clearly it's actually two separate bodies sort of conjoined into one, so maybe that's a wee correction. My point was actually about the £250,000 or thereabouts advance to Lockerbie Old School Group, which clearly I think from the paragraphs 3.4 and 5 will allow it to sort of get ready to be able to draw down the sort of full grant that they'd applied for, which would be very positive. I'm just sort of a wee bit, it's just really to get a bit of clarity on the timeline and the conditions around that. So presumably that grant will allow the design, tender and let of a contract within the next 13 months so that they can then trigger potentially the drawdown of the full funding, which I don't know, is there any sort of guarantee on that, or is it sort of, if they do that, they might then be able to get that funding from the reserve pot? It's just to get a wee bit of certainty around that. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Melissa, can you assist with that, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the bid that we put to the Scottish Government in October 2021 was unsuccessful, but what was really unusual about it was that the Scottish Government notified us that the project had actually been put on a reserve list for allocation of RCGF during the next financial year, which is 22-23. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have to resubmit a grant submission. We will be required to resubmit the RCGF grant submission in 22-23, so we need to go through that two-stage process again. However, if the project meets the threshold at RCGF Stage 2, and we're confident that we will be able to present a strong case, having presented a very strong case last time and received very positive feedback, we feel that if we're able to present a strong case that meets the threshold, if there is what they would have is slippage, underused funds available from their RCGF budget for 22-23, then they may be able to allocate that funding to our council in 22-23 if the project was able to be tender ready and let a works contract by the end of that financial year. If they didn't have that slippage money, then it still leaves open the opportunity for the project to be recommended for funding in any event, but the funding wouldn't become available to us until 23-24. So what this work is going to enable the group to do is to take the project to tender readiness, so ready to go to tender. It won't go out to tender, but it'll have what's called REBA Stage 4, which is technical design. It'll have its warrant, it will have its tender documentation, bills of quantities, etc. All of that will be ready, so that if our council receives a notification that we're going to be awarded funding in 22-23, we can give a green light to the group to go to tender with a view of getting a works contract committed and our council drawn down the money next financial year instead of the following one. So it's really about accelerating a project so that it's ready if funding becomes available sooner than expected, that we're able to take up that opportunity.
Okay, thank you. And just a wee sort of final assurance, presumably we'll be working with the group, or is that what the £250,000 is for, to spend within this year to make sure that whenever they get to that tender ready point, that it meets the criteria that you've just alluded to, so as to be fully compliant with whatever needs to happen to draw down that funding either within this year if there's slippage, or sorry, next year, or in 23-24. Would that be right?
Chair, if I can answer that, yes. So if this committee decides to agree that advance of grant, a grant offer goes out to the group, but part of that grant offer contains a breakdown of the milestones that the group would be expected to achieve during that time frame in terms of progress in doing that work. We also have, obviously as part of our due diligence, we're clear about what the money is being spent off that's eligible for grant. So that is the technical professional fees, the architect, quantity surveyor, mechanical and electrical engineer, CDM consultant, structural engineer, planning consents, building warrants and associated fees. So it's things that are only technically eligible for grant and that will further this project on a month basis to check progress and verify that things are going forward, and also supporting them address any issues that might arise during that time frame as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. That's really helpful detail. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Thanks, Melissa. And can I just check, at 2.5 is all roads lead to Whithorn, isn't it? We can just delete trust. Right, excellent. That's helpful clarification. Okay, I have Councillor Hill next.
Sorry. Right, we have a Councillor.
I have Councillor Hislop next, Ivor.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points. One on the blockade delivery stage, Appendix 2, strategic employment sites. The grant recipient is being pressed by DGC Legal Services. Is that normal practice to actually press someone through legal services to bring in the confirmation, or is there an issue there that we need to know about, that we need to flag up? And the other one was, going forward, there are a lot of things coming to tender stage. Are we seeing any issues with significant rises in tenders that mean some of these projects might not be delivered in full? Or are we cutting our cloth to actually fit the budget? And if we're cutting our cloth to fit the budget, can I just remind you 17 million for a swimming pool across the road?
Thanks, Councillor. What should have been built right in the first place? Melissa.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so in answer to the first question, so a grant offer was issued via legal services to the grant recipient, and what we did was that the grant recipient was allowed to draw down 90% of the value of that grant to complete the works, and we retained 10% of that grant. And basically said you can get the balance once you've delivered the completion certificate, so that we're satisfied that the works that were being undertaken were done to the correct standard. Now, the works have already been completed, and it's just that piece of paper that we're pressing for. And obviously the grant recipient has it's just been swallowed up in all of their COVID work and all the disruption that's happened over the past 12 months. So it's a paperwork issue, but we are really quite keen to get this one finished off, tied off and off our programme, and that's why, because the legal offer was going through legal, that's why they're involved. I also hope that answers your question. In terms of the second part of the question, it won't be us that will be tendering the works for these projects. The works will be tendered by the grant recipients that we award the grants to. Those projects invariably have a cocktail of capital funding, so the risk is spread across a number of different funders, although it ultimately sits with the grant recipient. At this particular stage, yeah, we are nervous about the construction costs, although what I can reassure you is that the quantity surveyors that produced those cost plans on which the funding bids were developed, when they work out the cost plans, they index them to the quarter of the year that they expect that project to be going to tender. So we have allowed for that cost price inflation through that indexing approach. Obviously, that indexing approach, Councillor, isn't by any means a guarantee. So if the tenders were to come back at more than was allowed for in the budgets, then we would be sitting down with our project partners to receive their proposals. And obviously, one of the first things we'd be looking for them to do is to undertake some form of value engineering exercise to explore how they'd be able to bring the tender prices down to a more affordable level. The other options that we have available to us, and that we have actually drawn gone on in the past 12 months is where we as a local authority are receiving external funding to then provide funding to those projects. We have gone back to those funders, and on 2 particular occasions we've been successful in getting an uplift of grant. So those are just 2 options that are available to us, and what we'll be doing is working with them over the period to make sure that we can bring those projects in at a budget that still demonstrates value for money and affordability. Thank you.
Right.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks for that. It was just to say that I didn't want to see us cut the project, to fit the funding, but if it's a case of that we can do that, that'll be fine. And it sort of gives me a wee bit of reassurance that we're sort of guesstimating when it'll be on site, because I think there are delays in construction as well, not just the actual cost. So if we've got an idea of that, we're getting a sort of realistic, as best we can anyway, level of guarantee. Thank you for that.
Yep. Thanks, Ivor. I think it's fair to say there's quite a lot of challenges involved with construction and tendering at the moment, without a doubt. Okay, I have Councillor Hagman, Councillor Brodie, Councillor Nicholson, then Councillor Slope before we go to the recommendations. So I'll go to Councillor Hagman next. Katie?
Thank you, Chair. So for a monitoring Q3 report, there's an awful lot of information in here, which I think is probably reflected in the amount of members wanting to ask questions. But first of all, I just want to say thank you to Simon and Melissa. I appreciate that you guys are working across a huge range of projects here, and certainly in Ward 1 and 2, the fact that we're having regular meetings on the economic development within Whittingtonshire, I think is to be commended. I think we maybe need to do a little bit more comms, maybe if that's from the elected members' point of view, to get that message out to the public, because so often we hear that there's nothing happening, the West is forgotten, but actually there's huge amounts of work coming forward. And certainly in terms of the George Hotel side, I know that, certainly at the last meeting I attended, it was really welcomed looking at the Arts and Cultural Centre on this site. What I would also possibly do is direct members to the DG Unlimited film that was published a couple of months ago, entitled There's a Place, because it is a beautiful film and it highlights the absolutely incredible work that's being done by the arts, by the creative sector in Dumfries and Galloway, which I don't think we as a local authority give as much recognition as we potentially could do. So, that's a really positive thing. Another aspect I just want to sort of draw attention to is the Rindsor Galloway Coastal Path. And again, this is a really fantastic project, and I'm really pleased to note the additional funding coming in here. But in terms of the countryside and the infrastructure, and I now note we've got biodiversity in there, which is music to my ears as well. The Appendix 5 that we've got on the report on page 115, I'm looking at, there's not a lot of projects there that actually is focusing on biodiversity, but I'm hopeful as we move forward we'll get more. But one which is the native tree planting scheme, which we've got internal capital of £10,000, and that's on page 115. Now, it makes reference to any match funding, and this is a tree planting grant scheme, but there's no additional money in there. Are we expecting to get funds back on that project? Just because if we're putting £10,000 in, which I'm delighted to support, and it's a grant, what aspect of that is the grant scheme? And if I could get a bit more detail on that, that'd be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Simon, I see you've unmuted. Are you going to take those ones, please?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I know obviously sort of Katie's points in relation obviously to the work and the comms, and we'll look into how we can sort that out. In relation to the tree planting grant, the reason why we haven't put any match funding in there at this moment in time, Councillor Hagman, is that we're in the last stages of trying to finalise what that might be. We've got offers on the table to mean that actually for the 10,000 that we're putting in, we're likely to get about £35,000 to £45,000 worth of external funding from other sources. The tree planting grant scheme is aimed at smaller schemes up to £1,000. It's 100% grant funded, and it's obviously open to all across the region, which is quite useful. At this moment in time, I think sort of in the current year's scheme, we've planted around about 11,000 trees across the region. So it's positive, and obviously it's been well received, which is why the scheme is continuing. But we're working obviously with the Borders Forest Trust and also the Woodland Trust as well to see how we can obviously maximise this at a local level.
Okay, thanks very much, Simon. Katie, did you want to come back?
No, that's really helpful. Thanks. I think in future, for future committees, it would be really great to get what are we doing as a local authority as a separate report, but not necessarily for the next committee, just as a future report. I think that would be really useful to highlight, because we're doing so much positive work locally that, you know, sometimes it's only when it's in the report that it gets highlighted. But, you know, thanks very much for that.
That's great. Thank you very much, Katie. So I'll go to Councillor Brodie next. Richard.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I think I share the frustration of Councillor Sloan, who spoke earlier. We're two large towns in the extremities, east and west of the region, and we both feel that we need some more support for our aspirations for our towns. We did put something in place in Annan after the loss of 500 jobs plus at Pinneys, but that only lasted a year, and it was just starting to make an impact when it was withdrawn. We've had no really dedicated person in Annan for 2 years anyway, and we are lucky that we have somebody for the whole of Arundel and Eskdale now, which will get some support, but that's good. That's a lot of support for the whole of our area. So I think when we're looking at budgets, we should say how can we use the money we've got to put something in place for Annan and Stranraer, so they've got dedicated support rather than sort of fragmented support which we've had in the past.
Thanks, Richard. I think I'll take that as a comment in the run-up to budget setting. Councillor Nicholson has withdrawn his request to speak. I'll just absolutely double check he's content to do that. So I will then go back to Councillor Sloan, and then we'll go to the recommendations. Tommy?
Yeah, I'll be very brief, Chair. I was surprised to hear Councillor Hagman saying that we weren't getting the message across to the public as far as community projects go. The problem is we are getting the message across, and in some areas it's not a good message. Yeah, there is good messages in there, and we should be highlighting them. But there's also the ones that the press are catching on to are the ones that are not so good. I asked you, Chair, earlier on if you could possibly have the committee look at having this officer in place within the Whittington area. Now, I realise that would have to come through your administration. I'm not that naive that it has to be an administration decision. But I would ask that you give serious thought to putting this forward.
Thanks, Tommy. Certainly you can put forward an amendment to the recommendations if you wish to do so. I mean, what I'm seeing here is a team of officers working on this project. You know, I have projects in my own ward that would give their eye teeth for a team to be allocated to them. Naturally, every officer is doing other things as well. We can't get away from that. We haven't got enough people to go around. What we are doing is trying to allocate as much resource as possible to make progress with this project. Because, again, you know, to an extent, Tommy, you and I do agree. I recognise that it looks like a picture from the Blitz. It's not an appropriate vision for the town centre of Stranraer, and we want to sort it out. However, I think, certainly in my view, having a team of folk who are working on this is the best possible option. I think perhaps we are going to disagree on that, but as I say, we get to 2.4. If you want to make a recommendation, request an alternative to 2.4, then that's you know, the committee will certainly look at that. But I think my own opinion is that a team of folk working on this is important that we have and that we continue to provide. Before you come back, Tommy, if you want to come back, I see David Ingalls and then Vice Chairs come in. So, Councillor Ingalls, David, you first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Melissa and Simon, for this report. I see you smiling, Melissa. I'm really pleased that we've got something for the George Hotel, you know, or at least got a vision, or we are developing a vision. You know, I was afraid we were going to fall into the old trap of trying to shoehorn houses in there, which I'm pleased to see we're not going to do. I think it's important, and I've said this in the past, I've advocated this for a while. I think we can do something special with the George Hotel and turn it into, you know, part of the tourist anchor that you're trying to develop within Stranraer, and I think that's important for the west of the region. I would also ask, and I've asked this at committee previously, that elected members from Ward 2 can be included in any meetings to give their views. Because I think it's important that Stranraer is our anchor over here. Stranraer can be the tourism anchor, and all the towns and villages round about in the west here can feed off that. So it's important that we get the chance to at least feed into what's happening in the George Hotel if we can do that. But really pleased to see that. I'm not a great believer in office space. I don't think that's the way forward. I think we need to be delivering something within the George Hotel that is all tourist orientated, that's the main reason for the George Hotel in Stranraer. It will be a tourist anchor for the west of the region. But thanks again, Melissa, for your work on this. It's really appreciated.
Thanks, David. And I do agree with your assessment, and we have some track record and experience in supporting projects that have turned rather unloved old buildings that had run out of previous use into good tourist visitor attractions. And there's a couple in Kirkcudbright alone, for example, that we had a hand into, various extents over the years. So we certainly have experience in that, and I think there is a lot of potential in that as a way forward. Melissa, can I just check in the point regarding engagement with members on Ward 2? I think from memory you have already been doing that, but we'll just check that's the plan going forward.
Yes, we do. We have Ward 1, we have members' briefings for Ward 1 and Ward 2 briefings. And we also have, we have briefings for Ward 1 and Ward 2 members collectively as a group. But we also have a separate regular briefing with the socialist group that we're asked to go, which is obviously focusing on Ward 1. But I think maybe what we need to do is have another look at specific briefings that are focusing on George Hotel. We haven't had one specifically for George Hotel, but it sounds to me that members are asking for Ward 2 members. Ward 2 members are asking, and perhaps Ward 1 are as well, for a specific briefing, regular briefings on the George Hotel project itself. And I would be happy to arrange that.
I think that'd be very helpful, Melissa, if you could take that away as an operational action. I think that would be welcomed by members across the piece. I see.
Chair, can I come back in just for 1 second?
Sorry, beg your pardon. Yes, of course.
Yeah. No, thanks for that, Melissa. Really appreciate that. If the bullet points at 3.9 on page 69, the top one, strengthen the town centre economy. It's not just the town centre economy that this will strengthen. It's the economy, the tourism economy in the west of the region. Thanks, Chair.
David, I think that is a fair point, and I do remember making similar arguments about projects not dissimilar to this in the Stewartry. And I recognise the interest that wards neighbouring can have in these projects as well. So I think both points are well taken. I'll go to the Vice Chair, Archie.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. And it's just to say, basically back at what you were saying there, there's a group of officers in Stranraer. I think the clarity is that, it's economic development at the end of the day, and obviously the economic development officer who's in charge of it all is Steve Rogers at the end of the day, and Steve will give directions to that group of officers, but also take direction from that group of officers as well. I hope it's given some form of confidence that we are looking to make sure that the George Hotel is taken forward, and certainly the Stranraer economic regeneration project is going to be, as successful as it can be because of the officers that we actually have in that place now.
Yeah, thanks, Archie. Much appreciated. I see another hand up. My apologies. I'm trying to see who it is. Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Rob. It was just following on from what Richard was saying. I just wanted to seek clarity because I'm aware that within Annan we still have at least 2 officers that are dedicating time there. We have David Gardner and we have Shelley Bell who are working, on business opportunities in the Annan area. But I think Richard's point is that I think because of or certainly some of the resources being reallocated to, the grants at the moment, the COVID grants, etc., then it'll be business as normal once we get back to normality, and we will have officer resource in Annan, because obviously we hear a lot about Stranraer, but Stranraer's about the same size. Annan's just slightly shorter, and there's smaller, and there's lots of opportunities in this part of the region as well, and we need to actually keep on top of that and explore every avenue.
Okay, thanks, Sean. I do recognise the point about officers being detailed to processing business grants. I mean, that's taken up the month of January. We're going to get an update on that when we get back to the running order, and the additional information that was circulated before committee gives a clear picture of that. So I will go to the recommendations, although I think perhaps from the feedback, Councillor Sloan is trying to come back in.
Just very, very briefly, Chair. I think you'll recognise that this subject won't go away. I will be back on the subject of project manager for this project. We know that there's an election coming up in May. I'm hoping that'll focus the minds of a lot of the people down the other end of the region as far as when they're looking for votes. So let's just wait and see.
Thank you, Councillor Sloan. I confidently predict this issue will continue to be reported to whatever the successor committee is of this and the membership of it. And I certainly hope that will be the case, because I hope members will want to keep a close eye on progress with this and deliver a really good facility to help boost both Stranraer and the wider economy of Whittingtonshire as a whole. Melissa, you wanted to come back in before we go to the recommendations, so I will do that, and then we are going to the recommendations.
Yes, sorry, Chair. It's just to clarify. I think we're perhaps being at cross purposes. As the George Hotel project moves forward and becomes a more, there has to be a technical solution, and we start moving forward to the delivery of that technical solution, there will be a dedicated project manager for that project. So all of our projects that then start move forward to a technical delivery stage, once they reach a certain stage within that process, if it's a council delivered project, there is an allocated project manager managing that project, working to a project board. So it's just in case there was any, it's just at the moment in its current stage, we're working on a whole team basis while we put in place all those arrangements. So it was just to clarify that point, that there will be a project manager.
Okay, Melissa, I think that is very helpful and appreciate the clarification. Okay, members, we will go to the recommendations. At 2.1, are we content to note the update on the asset class expenditure to 31st December 21 as set out in Appendix 1?
Noted.
2, are we content to note the programme progress and project updates as set out in the report and in Appendix 2?
Noted.
And also the rest of that as follows, including now the inclusion of Appendix 5 with the countryside and biodiversity projects. I take it we are content to note. 2.3, can we agree that the grant of £238,627 be advanced to the Lockerbie Old School Group? That's as outlined in that full recommendation.
Agreed.
Agreed. 2.4, can we note the outcome of the previous expression of interest from a partner developer in relation to the former George Hotel site, and agree that the preferred project approach would be to work with stakeholders to prepare project proposals for a community, arts and cultural centre on the site as set out in paragraph 311. Well, it's not part of the recommendation. We do note, since it's on the public record, that when the project gets to the right point, a project officer will be appointed. Recommendation 3. This. 2.5 then, can we agree that a grant of £149,828 be advanced to All Roads Lead to Whithorn, deleting trust there, and following in that paragraph?
Agreed.
Okay, and finally 2.6, can we note the request to National Lottery Heritage Fund as set out in paragraph, that's 3.14 rather than 3.41, and in Appendix 6, to extend the delivery of the Rins of Galloway Coastal Path project to the end of March 2023.
Noted.
Okay, members, thanks very much. Melissa, Simon, thank you for accommodating us, bringing that forward. We will revert back to item 4. Perhaps with a slight pause to allow everybody else to get back to where they were, either on screens or in hard copy. So item 4 is the Strategic Housing Investment Plan report by Head of Economy and Development. This report seeks our agreement to the inclusion of new projects on the Strategic Housing Investment Plan and also updates us on the delivery of the SHIP during 2020-2021. Jamie Little's with us to assist if members have any questions. Jamie, before we go to questions, have you anything to add to your report, please?
Thanks, Chair. Nothing further to add at this time.
Grant, thanks very much, Jamie. So I'll open it to members' questions or comments. Councillor Dryburgh, Archie.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I fully support the recommendations within this report, as you would expect, being the Housing Forum's chair, the Strategic Housing Forum chair. I think this helps improve what is a really good programme anyway, moving forward for social housing and helping other partners build their appropriate accommodation. So happy to move, Chair.
Archie, thank you very much. Fully agree on all points. Are there any other comments or questions?
Chair, Councillor Nicholson would like to speak.
Of course, yep. Thank you. Thanks, Claire. Ronnie.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm very pleased with this report. It's much needed housing within certain areas in Dumfries, in the northwest area in particular. And the type of housing that's being proposed here is eco-friendly housing, and I think it's a good scheme. So I'll be very pleased to second Councillor Dryburgh.
Thank you, Ronnie. I'm very much hoping there's broad agreement across the piece on this. I think it's a good piece of work and some really important updates. I've got Councillor Hagman and we'll do the recommendations. Katie.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I will fully admit the SHIP, I think, is a really positive thing going forward, and I'm really pleased to see it in here. And yes, in terms of responding to the climate change, I think it's absolutely imperative. Can I just double check the 106 million pounds that has been allocated from Scottish Government, is that for the full term, and will that come down as and when we need it, or is it all allocated at once? How is that distributed? Because I just think 106 million pounds is so significant to Dumfries and Galloway that we need to ensure that we utilise on every penny of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Jamie, you'll be able to assist with the detail, but I think we've historically been pretty robust in terms of utilising our allocation. But maybe you can assist with Councillor Hagman's question. Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Hagman. In terms of the 106.148 million, that is set out over 5 years of the project. So there's sums that previously reported to committee in a table setting out the annual allocations. As the Chair mentioned there, we do work very hard to try and ensure that that's drawn down on an annual basis. It has become incredibly challenging, but we are working very effectively with partners to try and maximise that. But over the next, we're almost completed, obviously, the 21-22 programme, looking into 22-23. There's a similar amount of funding spread out across those years of just over 20 million in each financial year. And as the outturn report is published by the Scottish Government, continue to bring this back to members for their awareness.
Thanks very much, Jamie. Katie, do you want to come back?
No, that's great. I think it's a really positive thing, and it can't help having struggled to find affordable housing myself at some point. I think it's just, it's really positive. So thanks very much, Jamie.
Thank you, Katie. Tommy, you're next on my list, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's just that I wanted to make a point on the SHIP project, not just the lack of houses, which we all know that has been for a long time, but now what we're getting more and more of is the size of properties that are needed. We have very little 3, 4, and certainly no 5-bedroom properties spare. We had an occasion recently on the homeless in the Stranraer area. We had nine people living in a 2-bedroom house. I mean, that's unacceptable. But when you've got nothing else, you take it. But I'd like us to look at the bigger properties for the bigger families. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Tommy. I think it's an important point. Jamie, can you assist with that, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Sloan, for the question. Just on the larger properties there, we work very closely with our development partners, and that very much includes the Homelessness and Housing Options Service as well, particularly where there are issues around overcrowding in properties, and certainly recognising that there is a demand for larger properties. Councillor Sloan will be familiar with the development that DGHP are undertaking in Nursery Avenue, where they've recently had to combine 2 properties into one to accommodate a larger family. And these are approaches we take very effectively through the Development Forum, which is an officer working group. We work closely with the registered social landlords. And where there are particular issues, we identify those and try and seek a solution within one of the investment plan projects. It's not just affordable housing, it can often be accessible properties, it can be around people needing to come out of hospital. So we do work very closely with a range of partners, but very much the need for larger family homes right across the region is really recognised. And we hope to bring forward some more projects, particularly in the Stranraer area, that can help us to accommodate that.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks very much. I think we will all look forward to those coming forward, and of course, particularly members in the West. If there are no further questions or points on item 4, turn to recommendations. Are we content to note at 2.1 the outturn position for delivery of the 2020 to 21 affordable housing supply programme in Dumfries and Galloway? That's as outlined in section 3.2.
Noted.
And are we content to agree the inclusion of College Mains Phase 2 and Haley's Yard in the SHIP, which have been submitted to the Council by development partners? That's as detailed in paras 3.3.4 and 3.3.5.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Excellent, thank you very much. Thank you, Jamie. Although I guess you're staying with us because item 5 is Vacant and Derelict Land and Property Strategy, report by Head of Economy and Development. In this report, members, is seeking our agreement to the consultation mandate for the development of the Vacant and Derelict Land and Property Strategy. And it also updates us on arrangements for a members' seminar to help inform the development of the strategy. Jamie Little is still with us to assist with questions. Just check as usual, Jamie, is there anything you'd like to add before we go to members' questions?
Thanks, Chair. Nothing to add at this time.
That's grand. Thank you, Jamie. We'll go straight to questions then. Archie again, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. And I think it's important that we have the seminar in March, because it's a long time coming, especially for Jim Dempster. When you look at the derelict property it has in Sanka, I think importantly the mandate is clear as to what we're actually looking for, and happy to move forward that way, Chair.
Yep, thank you very much, Archie. I really welcome the fact this is here. It's undoubtedly a perennial issue, all sorts of different ways we can tackle it, and I think it's really important we get into some of that when we do both the seminar and also look at the consultation process as well. So entirely agree with that. Katie, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. It's a really positive report. This is not much in here, but it's a really great start. And the fact that we've got the consultation mandate and authorisation document in the appendix is really welcome. I don't know if we always get the full detail of this when we're taking forward strategies, but it's really welcome to get that here. There's been a lot of work locally within Ward 2 of looking at the derelict properties, etc. And certainly our ward officer, Graham McKee, did a huge amount of work with the community. So I'm just wanting to double check that the learning from that work will be incorporated going forward, because certainly people in Ward 2 have been working hard on this for a few years now, and it's great to see it now, going forward across the region. But it's just to double check that the learning from that project will be incorporated going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Jamie?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Hagman. In terms of consultation mandates coming to committee, I think that in particular, given the importance of the vacant and derelict land and property strategy, it was really recommended and recognised that it was key to get the input of members at every stage. also offers an opportunity to keep you updated and ensure that the work is going ahead and progressing as expected. In terms of the work that was reported to the Whittington Area Committee, they made a number of recommendations to committee of parts that should be included within the strategy and some key elements. And hopefully that's been covered in the scope of the strategy. We certainly look to further engage with that particular group as part of this consultation as well. I'm very much hoping that they'll accept an invite to partake in the consultation. I'm sure they will.
Thanks very much, Jamie. Katie, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. It's just one other point which I did raise at the last DNR committee. In 3.3, it talks about the council's priorities, about being an inclusive council. I think I had requested at that point, can we ensure that we incorporate our climate response within that? Because obviously if we're developing land and vacant properties and derelict land, that we take into account the climate crisis going forward in terms of biodiversity or any development that may come out of that. So it was just to add that point in once again. Thank you.
Katie, thanks very much. Jamie, on that point? I mean, I guess this is something that we'll pick up as we go through the process as well, but just keen to get your thinking on that.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Hagman. Yeah, obviously this report is very much focused on the consultation mandate, hence the reason for highlighting the inclusive council priority. But now within the scope, as you rightly pointed out, you did ask for that at the Economy and Resources Committee in November, and that is very much part of the scope of the strategy now to respond to climate change. So we can give the council reassurance that has very much been included.
Okay, Jamie, thanks very much. I think that's very helpful. I'll go to Councillor Thompson next, please. Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. It was just on the consultation mandate, and this is maybe just an observation, but certainly on page 32 it lists some of the programme of activities planned or suggested, but we have noticed, I think, to be fair, that in community conversations recently, particularly around the budget and active travel recently, there's been a reducing uptake or sometimes very little uptake from members of the public. So I don't know if we need to maybe tweak or review how we make those more sort of attractive or sort of gauge how we sort of target that, because certainly while initially during the sort of restriction period there was quite a lot of activity online where people seemed to participate. I think maybe either the novelty's worn off or maybe we're just not quite, we need to maybe refresh that a bit. So it's maybe something to take on board when we're planning that, rather than just sort of rolling out an old template and hoping that it works. But I think officers are probably aware of this and are probably working on it as we speak, but it was just to raise that point. Thank you.
Stephen, thanks for that. Yeah, and I think it is an important point, because I'd hope we would get good public engagement with this. Given that, particularly where places are affected by derelict and vacant land, it certainly in my experience has been a topic of interest. Jamie, any points on that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Obviously, we work very closely with colleagues in community planning and engagement to make sure that we are operating in a way that tries to maximise citizens' contributions towards the strategy development. So the lessons from those recent consultations will certainly be taken on board, and we'll try and make it a subject matter that people really want to engage with. I think there's an element that needs to go into the pre-work and making sure there's enough information that people feel they can come along and be confident that what they're saying is actually going to be reflected in the strategy. So, as I say, we are working very closely with our community planning and engagement team, and we will continue to do that throughout. They are key members of our officer working group as well.
Could I quickly come back, Chair, if that's okay?
Yeah, even that's fine.
Thanks, and thanks, Jamie. I think, I mean, obviously, I know some successful recent online sort of virtual engagement sessions that have been at have very much focused on those local issues, if you like. So there was a recent one in relating to Moffat and Lockerbie health provision, for example, which was very well attended, but that was quite specific. So if we're focusing on, like you say, those maybe specific derelict properties in specific areas, then certainly I'm sure there'll be much more local interest rather than if we say, what's your general view on our regional strategy, which is a big turn-off for some. But yeah, so I really welcome that if it's really targeted at local issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. I think, again, a fair point, and people will perhaps be motivated by the issues that are closest to them. In fact, people very commonly are, and there's no question about that. Okay, members, if there are no further questions or comments, just to check. Okay, so can we then, at the recommendations, note at 2.1, the elected member seminar on vacant derelict land and property strategy has been scheduled for March 2022. And at 2.2, I agree the vacant and derelict land and property strategy consultation mandate as attached at the appendix.
Good.
Okay, thank you, members. Jamie, thank you very much. I'm glad to see this moving forward. Okay, item 6 is Local Development Plan 2, outcome of the Langham Conservation Area Character Appraisal and Management Plan Supplementary Guidance Consultation. The report's by Head of Economy and Development. And this report advises us on the comments received on the consultation on the draft Langham Conservation Area Character Appraisal and Management Plan Supplementary Guidance. Shona McCoy and Mizzy Marshall are here to assist if members have any questions. Good morning, both. Shona, is there anything that you'd like to add before we go to questions?
No, nothing further to add, Chair. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Shona. So I'll go to questions then, please. Archie.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I'm very pleased this report has come forward again after the last report, making sure that we can go ahead with the consultation on the character appraisal and management plan, especially for the Langham conservation area. Really pleased with the outcome and happy to approve going forward, Chair. Just maybe one question is the Coal Authority did said that the Coal Authority has no specific comments to make. I am a bit concerned about something that happened in the area earlier on. Have they made any specific issues regarding the conservation area in Langham?
Do you want me to take that, Shona? Yeah, we weren't even, we didn't actually consult them specifically. It's something that they picked up themselves, and they haven't made any comments as has been reported. They haven't made anything of any substantive nature, just saying that they've nothing to say. So no is the answer. But if you think there's something we need to contact them about, I mean, we can obviously do that.
No, that's fine, Mary. That's fine. It's just that I was wondering because there was some issues in Canopy earlier on and things like that, like, you know, with regards to Coal Authority. So that's fine.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. If there are no other questions or comments, can we go to the recommendations?
Chair, can I come in? Got my hand up there. Councillor Tate.
Oh, Ronnie. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand in time. Yes, please, Ronnie, carry on.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me know. It's just probably a comment is right enough, but I'd just like to highlight what was reported in the character appraisal draft papers, and it's concerning the Erskine Church in Langham. Now, it's come under the building at risk in the appraisals, and it's also highlighted it needs immediate attention in the appraisals as well. So I'd just like to highlight that, you know, we've been trying to work with building standards to get this building surveyed for quite a long time now. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened yet. So I'm just highlighting the building at risk, and the Erskine Church is certainly a building at risk. Thanks, Chair. This probably will go to another item, by the way.
Thanks, Ronnie. Yes, so I think probably it will do, but certainly, I mean, even as far over as Dalbeattie, I was actually aware of the issue, having picked up on it. Sean, Mizzy, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add on that. I mean, it's a statement of fact, isn't it, that it is a bit of an issue?
As far as I understand, building standards have carried out inspections regularly on the building. They had the scaffolding repaired so that the inspections were safe. And at any point when members of the public have alerted me, I've obviously passed that directly on to building standards. So while it may still look poor in its presentation, which is quite clear. It is actually being monitored regularly, to my knowledge.
Okay, Ronnie, did you want to come back in? And then I see Steve Rogers may want to come in as well. Ronnie? I'm just wondering if there's a connection issue. Okay, Steve, you carry on, and then we'll see if we can bring Ronnie back in.
Yeah, thank you,
Sorry,
Chair.
I'll start again.
Right, I'll wait.
Okay, carry on, Ronnie.
It's just that, you know, I'm well aware that you know, the steeple gets surveyed and the scaffolding gets checked. But the problem with this building is, and I have been inside it actually, it needs surveyed in the inside as well as the outside as well, because in my opinion, it's a dangerous building.
Okay, thanks, Ronnie. Steve?
Yeah, Chair, thanks very much. I was just going to say that I'll arrange for Councillor Tate and the other local members to be given an update on the current position with regard to that more extensive survey work that we had committed to carrying out, and just to assure that those short-term works to make the building safe from a public risk point of view have all been completed. However, we do need to now investigate the kind of longer term stability of that building with a view to continuing to engage with the owners to ensure that it's going to remain in a safe condition for the long term. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. Yes, I'd be grateful if that could be arranged. And of course, particularly relevant given the previous item, I'm bound to say. And perhaps if there's a readout of that, it could be circulated to the committee after the briefing, just so that other members with an interest in the subject area, the policy area, have a grasp of what's kind of current with the issue. But grateful, Ronnie, for you raising it, and certainly don't make light of it. Okay, members, we'll go to the recommendations. At 2.1, are we content to note the consultation comments that have been received? That's as attached at the appendix.
Noted.
At 2.2, agree the proposed amendment in response to those comments at the appendix. Okay, we are content to agree that.
Good.
At 2.3, can we remit with powers to the Head of Economy and Development to notify Scottish Ministers of the Council's intention to adopt the Langham Conservation Area Character Appraisal and Management Plan as supplementary guidance?
Agreed.
And at 2.4, following completion of the relevant procedures as detailed at paragraphs 3.4 and 3.5, are we content to adopt the Langham Conservation Area Character Appraisal and Management Plan as supplementary to the P2?
Agreed. Adopt.
Excellent. Thank you very much, members. Shona, Mizzy, thank you for coming along. We'll move on to item 7. Which is renewal of Crown Estate lease at Whittington Bay Local Nature Reserve, reports by Head of Economy and Development. We are requested to approve the renewal of the 25-year regulating lease with Crown Estate Scotland for Whittington Bay Foreshore as part of the Local Nature Reserve. Simon Fieldhouse and Anna Johnson are here to assist if members have any questions. Simon, Anna, is there anything you'd like to add before we go to members' questions, please?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Okay, that's grand. In that case, we will go straight to questions. Katie.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so thank you for bringing the report before us. I can actually see the bay outside the window behind me from here, and I do note that, you know, this is the largest local nature reserve in Britain, which is really to be celebrated. And I'm looking at the report, and I'm conscious that there's not a lot of information that has been shared with local Ward 2 members. And I'm just wondering, in terms of the organisation, the groups that are involved, is there an opportunity that local ward members can maybe just get an update of what's actually happening within the reserve? And I'm just wondering, I'm aware that obviously the RSPB are involved in across Whittington, there's the bird hides, etc. And are they partners within the rent of this, or is it solely responsible for Dumfries and Galloway Council to be paying it's proposed £1,200? it was raised, and we did discuss this at Whittington Community Council last night, and certainly I know that this area is really well loved by the community in Whittington. And I also I'm looking at the appendix, and I'm just wondering, when we look at the picture on page 45 of the map, there's all the area on the west side, but there's very little on the east side. Now, I'm just looking at the section at Creetown. The map's so small you can hardly see, but locally known as the Inks. And again, I walk regularly down there, and it is absolutely full of wild birds, and it's a really incredible bit of land, and I'm just wondering why that's not included as part of the nature reserve. So there's a few questions there, Chair. I mean, I'm really happy to support this, and certainly I'm aware that Communities Committee there was a discussion on the £600,000 that's coming from Crown Estate Scotland. So if we're essentially paying £1,000 in and we're getting £6,000 back for the people in Whittington anyway, that is very good value, so to speak. But I'm just wondering if there's a little bit more detail that can be shared. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Simon, Anna, who would like to go first?
I'll maybe just pick up the first point, Chair, and then let Anna come in with the points of detail. We'd be more than happy to obviously arrange for Ward 2 members to get a more detailed briefing on where we are with the reserve and where we see ourselves moving forward over the next sort of couple of years to ensure that obviously members are fully aware of where we go. And apologies that hasn't happened so far, so we'll take an operational note of that, Chair, and move that one forward.
Okay, thank you, Simon. That'd be much appreciated. Anna?
I just wanted to say that the map shows the land that we're leasing from the Crown Estate. So actually the boundary of the LNR is slightly larger than that. So the map is showing the land that's subject of this lease and not the reserve itself. The reserve is larger, obviously. Thank you.
That clarifies that for sure. Katie, I think there was another point, wasn't there?
Well, no, I was just sort of. So, does the reserve cover the east side of the bay as well? Because obviously, it's only the west side that's highlighted.
I think we have three landholding or three agreements with land managers, landowners on the east side, and we've been discussing with them about renewal of their agreements with the council over the last couple of months.
Okay.
Okay, no, that's really helpful. If there's any meetings or anything taking place of the group, I think it would be really useful if members, local ward members, are available if we can attend. Appreciate everybody's diaries are really busy, but no, that's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Much appreciated. Councillor Wood, Andrew.
Thank you, Rob. First of all, yes, it is an interesting paper, and we have had extremely good conditions for the last 25 years at £120. I think that's extremely good. What I was wondering, though, over the last 25 years, and because it is such a positive asset to the area, are there any community groups that would take this on now and alleviate the council of the burden? And the other point I would like to ask, and that would be, could this have been part of the coastal projects that have been getting developed recently?
Okay, Anna, on community groups? Or Simon, whichever is more appropriate. My apologies.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think sort of we are, Councillor Wood, we are working obviously with the local wildfowlers at a local level to sort of obviously see where we can go. There is obviously the Whittington Bay Advisory Management Committee. The issue that we have is obviously in order to designate and to classify an LNR, it is the local authority that has to take the lead, and therefore obviously we are sort of, I suppose, bound by duty that we would have to be the leaseholder with the Crown Estates Commission for this. However, that doesn't stop us from obviously looking at new ways of how we might reduce the burden on the council and work with partners. So that is in train, but obviously we're not at a position at this moment in time to secure any income from those groups at this moment.
Thanks.
Chair, with your leave, also the second point then, and I take on board exactly everything that Simon said, But would this have been a possible project for the coastal projects?
Is that like the Coastal Path project, Andrew? Is that what you're thinking of?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Simon.
All right, thank you, Chair. We have done some work in the past, Chair, through yourself, in terms of looking at obviously the coastal access all the way along Dumfries and Galloway from Gretna all the way around, obviously to Ken Ryan. My understanding is obviously is that there was likely to be future funding that we can obviously look at in terms of how we can enhance and improve obviously conditions around the Whittington Bay Local Nature Reserve. So it's not something we put forward as yet, but obviously it is something that we will consider for future applications.
No, Chair, through yourself once again, very much appreciate that. It seems to me that here's an excellent tourism opportunity that we should be developing. That's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Certainly I've a lot of enthusiasm for having a Dumfries and Galloway coastal path. I think longer distance paths are attractive to folk. There's quite a list of them in Scotland, but folk are always interested in a new one, without a doubt. However, I think if we have no further questions or comments at this point, we'll turn to the recommendations. Are we content to note at 1 the need to renew the lease to ensure the continuation of the Whittington Bay LNR? That's at section 3.4.
Noted.
2.2, can we agree to the renewal of the regulating lease with Crown Estate Scotland for a period of 25 years with an annual rent of £1,250 per annum? That's at section 3.9.
Agreed.
2.3, allow property and legal services to proceed with the renewal of the lease.
Agreed.
Thank you, members. Thanks, Simon. Thank you, Anna. Turn to item 8. Item 8 is the Economy and Resources Revenue Budget Monitoring Report 21-22 for the period ended 31st December 2021. Report by the Director of Economy and Resources. So this report provides the third quarter revenue monitoring for economy and resources, including the impact of ongoing financial implications associated with COVID-19. Gillian Ross and Tam Alder are here to assist if members have any questions. Is there anything either of you would like to add to the report before we go to questions, please?
No, nothing at this stage, Chair. Thank you.
Dan, thanks very much. We'll go to members' questions and comments then. Okay, if there are no questions or comments, you'll have to forgive me while I get to the recommendations. Are we content to note at 2.1 the position as at end of December 2021 and excluding those additional costs that have been attributed to the COVID-19 response and recovery, that Economy and Resources is forecast to return on net underspend of 372,000. That's as detailed in Appendix 1. And are we content to note at 2.2 the progress against the delivery of the agreed policy development allocations applied to the 21-22 budget? That's as in Appendix 2.
Noted.
Okay, members, thank you very much. Tam, thank you. That was a quick session before committee this morning. Item 9 then is the Economic Recovery Plan 2019 to 23 update and COVID-19 business grants, and report is by Head of Economy and Development. So this report updates members on actions within the Economic Recovery Plan and seeks our agreement to additions to the programme focused on supporting economic recovery in our region. We are also provided with the latest updates on the current round of business support grants, which the Council is delivering on behalf of the Scottish Government. I think it'd be fair to add there that this has placed a significant additional pressure on staff who've been working very hard to process these as quickly as possible and as quickly as they have been able to. I know that we were circulated with some additional information prior to the committee, but I'll ask Steve and David to do an update on that, and based on that, when we get to the appropriate point in the consideration of the report. Notwithstanding that, Steve Rogers and David Gardner are here to assist with members' questions and comments. David, Steve, is there anything that you'd like to add in general before we maybe go to an update on the business grants, and then we'll go through the rest of the paper?
Thank you, Chair. There's nothing to add in general terms at this point, and I'm happy to answer any detailed questions that members might have, and also I'll bring David in terms of the update paper that was circulated to do with the distribution of the business grants. Latest position on that?
Okay, and in that case, could we go to that first? I'm conscious of members waiting to speak, but perhaps if we take that update first, and then I'll go to members' questions and comments. David? I'm not seeing David Gardner just at the moment, so we'll come back to that, and I'll go to members, and I've got Elaine first, please.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted clarification on 3.2, which says the Adventure Tourism Accelerator would be a 12-week programme rather than will be a 12-week programme, and a selected cohort of up to 16 early stage existing adventure tourism businesses. So again, it sounds a little bit uncertain as to whether or not those businesses have been selected or they've been contacted. But at the same time, we're talking about a start next month. So I just wondered what actually is the situation with regard to the Adventure Tourism Accelerator. Thanks.
Thanks, Elaine. Steve, if you can maybe update on that, please. And it strikes me that perhaps just thinking about timings of when the next committee is, maybe an update to members once we've got this up and running, just to give us a feel for how it's going, what the update's like, that sort of thing might be helpful. Might not just fit with the committee cycle, but perhaps something in writing could be.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Certainly, I think it is our intention to provide a kind of end-of-year report on the economic recovery plan to the next committee. And I think it's possibly just the language in that paragraph that project is progressing, and we have procured the delivery of that through specialist external consultants, and we're in the process of selecting the businesses, and the programme will run during March and beyond. We've also had discussions with our colleagues in Mid and East Antrim around opening that programme up also to businesses across the North Channel through the North Channel Partnership, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. I think that's very helpful, and yeah, it's something to update members on how that's going in due course. I think would be welcomed. So I've got Archie, then Katie, then Stephen, and then I think we'll go back to David and get an update on where we're at with business support grants. So Archie, you're next, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ian. I'm very much in favour of the recommendations on this, and I'm sure David will give a great update. But it's one specific thing which I'm sure all members of the committee got an email from a lady in Kirkcudbright regarding the caravan, the caravanette side of things with regard to the motorhome facilities and things like that. I don't know, I sent the email on to both Lorna and Steve. I just wonder if there's an update on that. And I think particularly it's about behaviours of drivers and things like that to make sure that we're taking that into consideration when we move forward. I think we did last year with the community safety team actually going out with the waste bags and things like that and supporting those that were classed as wild parking and things like that. But I just wanted to make sure if there was anything else to add to that.
Archie, thanks very much. And actually, I think it'd be fair to say we did get some quite positive feedback from folk who were touring the region and encountered our staff, and were very complimentary about how helpful and welcoming they were. And I do think that went a long way to alleviating, problems that you see in other parts of the country, perhaps, where the same approach is not necessarily being taken. But do recognise concerns about this. Of course we do. Steve, do you want to comment on that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to assure that those visitor management arrangements, which worked very well last year, are being stood up again for this season in anticipation of a continued higher level of interest in visiting the region. So it's important that we're prepared and anticipating. The issue with motorhomes that has been flagged up is one of the reasons that this recommendation has been brought forward to ensure that there is the provision of proper certified facilities to hopefully avoid the sorts of issues that occurred through the use of kind of informal parking last year. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Steve. I think that's think that is important clarification, and I hope it is some reassurance. We want to welcome folk and ensure they have a nice time, but clearly that's everybody who's wanting to enjoy our region, irrespective of what particular method they chose to get here and to travel around. I'll go to Katie next, please.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the report that we've got just now, and I think it is it's a positive report. We're taking proactive actions and things going forward. But just in terms of the detail, and I'm looking specifically at the sort of agreed allocations in the report on page 57, we've got the table on the Economic Recovery Fund allocation, and it's got that sitting at 682, and that full amount has been allocated, but I don't see where these small amounts that we're looking to agree would fit in. Where are we getting the funding for those? Because as far as I can tell, and correct me if I'm wrong, they aren't in this table. So that's my first point. Specifically on the 35k for the provision of new motorhome facilities, if we're allocating up to 5,000 per site, that would, and everybody applied for the maximum. Appreciate not everybody will. That would only allow for 7 extra sites, and we've got in the report that the target is for 15 new sites. So if there's if more applications come in than can support the 35k, will we be able to increase that amount, or will it be just on a first come first served basis on that? Because I think it is really welcome, especially the issue of black and grey waste, because I know locally throughout the region that this is an issue for visitors, and locals and communities are faced with the mess that's sometimes left at that point. So yeah, a couple of points there, Chair, if I can get a response, please.
Thanks, Katie. So, David, I see your hands up.
Yep.
Were you going to respond on these points, please?
I'm happy to take the latter part of Katie's point there. So I guess the £35,000 is our kind of best estimate, based on that not everybody will take £5,000, and from our experience of some expenditure on heirs before, it has been considerably less than that. But obviously what we want to try and encourage when we write up more details around the application is making sure that they are going to embed things like wastewater provision and other things, and part of it was also to try and encourage, if they're going to be doing lighting, that would be from renewable energy or off grid. So, but we do think that will be sufficient, and if we do require more, then obviously we would need to come back to the committee for further funding. But at this stage, we think that would be sufficient. And I guess it was just picking up in the previous point, I guess the principle of it was based on the visitor management experience last year of vehicles parking and lay-bys and in fields, and this is to encourage it to be in a more formal structure and with a certified heirs certification. That's the principle behind it.
Thanks, David. No, I think that's very helpful. Katie, did you want to come back?
Yeah, I was just I think that's helpful for that point. Is Steve able to respond to the budget question? Thank you.
Yes, sir. I knew there was a thanks, Katie.
Chair, I'll come back in and just update in terms of the budget allocations. So the 3 areas of additional expenditure that are included in the recommendations have been incorporated into those allocations that are set out in the table on page 57, Chair. So it incorporates those 3 recommendations as a result of slippage in spend on other areas within the plan. It is our intention, as I say, to bring a more detailed year-end report on the economic recovery plan, including how much of the funding has been spent and committed and how much is available for allocation into next year to the March committee. So we'll give a clearer indication of any remaining or outstanding balances at that point, Chair.
Right, okay. Thanks, Steve. Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just a couple of questions about the data tool. Obviously, I mean, it does, I suppose, highlight that we didn't really have the hard data, you know, in 2021, and we sort of, it seems like we got a sort of a word from a pal to sort of use calibrate on the Experian site. So, but I'm just sort of thinking it says on the page 56, I think it is, the average tourist in Scotland spends £28 per day in the local economy. So there's potential extra income into the region of over 500k. I'm just sort of wondering, obviously with the enriched data, there'll be a greater breakdown of different types of tourist or visitor, because obviously, you know, there'll be different types of international tourists, for example, or and people, you know, going to the sort of blue chip sort of attractions in various parts of Scotland where you would spend that amount of money and more. But I'm sort of wondering, would motorhome tourists fall into a slightly different strand of that? And do we have sort of more sort of granular data on what motorhome tourists would spend in any particular area? I'm just sort of thinking, obviously one of the attractions of motorhomes is that you can be on the move, there's a lot of freedom to roam, and you don't necessarily have to be tied to maybe sort of accommodation providers or whatever else. And I'm just sort of wondering how that would affect the spend per day, and is it different? So it's really just to get a wee bit of understanding on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. David, are you going to take that one?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, so we don't have data in terms of the spend, but I guess it is considered it would be lower in terms of motorhome spend, and that's some of the data we possibly get from Visit Scotland on a national basis. But in terms of a local base, regional basis, we really don't have very much data about how you actually split it down. And I guess the benefit of the tool will allow us to get more granular detail, as you mentioned, and actually hopefully then build upon linking that to the spend across the kind of, I guess, the different segments of, as you say, overseas tourists, which would be considered would normally spend more money, and then UK nationals, I guess, in more in that middle segment, and motorhomes is definitely, as you say, are not spending money in hotels or bed and breakfasts, and quite often have their own food or just use grocery stores, so therefore their spend in the region in terms of economic impact is probably considered at the lower end. But this data will allow us to get more information on different locations, different times of the year, and if events take place, actually what the actual impact of that event is on that particular day in terms of the economy spend. So it will start to give us more enriched data, and it allows us to work closely with South of Scotland Destination Alliance and also with our partners at SOSI and that whole bigger picture around the whole tourism.
Thanks, David. I'll bring Steve in and then see if Stephen has any follow-up. Steve?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just to add to that to say that on the back of the publication of this report, we have actually been contacted by one of the leading motorhome magazines with an interest in this and running it as a story with a particular feature on Dumfries and Galloway. So we can go back to them to see if they have any further insight or data in terms of that question about the levels of expenditure that are typically associated, because certainly in my own experience, it's not a cheap holiday in that you do tend to spend locally wherever you're travelling, whether that's in local shops, restaurants, bars, or visitor attractions. So it does add value significantly to the local economy, and if you like, the largest area of value add in terms of attracting visitors and tourists to the region is getting them to stay overnight, and that's the key. Yeah. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you, David. Stephen, did you want to come back?
Just very quickly, if that's okay. So no, that's useful, and I think really when we get that sort of greater breakdown of data locally, I think that'll really help, because I appreciate we can use a very sort of broad brush generalisations about what we think tourism is like, but actually we could be spending £1 to save a penny sort of thing, and it's just really to guard against low returns if it's not really generating that much yield for what we have to spend, because clearly the heat map analysis will allow us to then, as it says on page 55 at the top of the bullet points, it gives us that assistance in terms of being able to plan frequency for cleaning streets, maintenance, all the various sort of things that we can sort of target. Obviously the data will be historic, so it's not going to predict the future, but it can certainly prepare us. And just given over the sort of COVID period, if you like, we don't necessarily know what things will become, although we've got a fair idea of what they've been, but that's changed a lot since 2016, which is how far the data goes back to. And even in that period, there have been a lot of changes in terms of what was available for tourists if they were in the region, and with all the restrictions, etc. And people will have been creative and sort of done different things maybe. So as we go forward, it would be interesting to see that granular data, because we might have a bit of difficulty predicting what the next opportunity will be. So I think we should always be ready to be flexible and not get too bound by yesterday's data, if you like, much as it is. It will be useful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stephen. I think that is definitely a good point. Well made. I'll move on to Ivor, and then I have Andrew Wood. So Ivor.
Thank you, Chair. It's to do with the sort of data that we'll collect from the Calibrate footfall measurement tool. One of the points is understanding which towns attract visitors and where they come from to inform further future investment in tourism. Now, how are we going to use that data? Is it a case of, if I go back to Visit Scotland, they had the targeting elderly folk for the snowdrops in January visit to Dumfries. And that was where it was thought this would be a good idea, because data showed that elderly people would come to the region to see snowdrops in the spring. But something sort of came up the other day I saw on Facebook, that bombers that went to Germany and came back, they noticed where all the holes were in the planes. And what they did was they said, right, we need to patch up where they are and strengthen those areas. And somebody said, no, what you need to do is strengthen the areas that aren't holed, because the planes that aren't coming back must be getting hit there. Are we looking to target what we already know, or are we going to target what we need to get into the area of who else can we bring to Dumfries and Galloway?
Thanks, Ivor. I think that's known as confirmation bias. I might be wrong. I think that's the term for it. But yeah, actually, it's a very fair point. I suspect the answer might be we won't know till we see what the data is. But I'm going to ask David whether that's just my daft laddie notion or not.
Thanks, Chair. Absolutely. I think that the key thing is for us to get this data and have the different locations on and learn how to use the tool, and then work with our partners around the whole, because obviously South of Scotland Destination Alliance do the local marketing and do that segmentation targeting, so we can feed that information and influence how that might do. But I think there's it's a learning process about actually how we gather that data, use it, and then consider the options of how if we're trying to do specific targeting in terms of locations. But it's also going to inform us about if there's over tourism or which can then influence in terms of our whole infrastructure in terms of roads or parking and highlight issues that we need to resolve to make it a more attractive and more enjoyable location for people to come and visit. So I think it's really broad in terms of how we can use it, but I think at the moment it's a bit of a learning curve, and we're to a certain extent we're pioneers in doing this. That I'm not aware of anybody else that's using it, so which I think is great that we can use technology in a different way.
Thanks, David. And I see a thumbs up from Ivor. Okay, go to Andrew next, please, and then I think we're ready to go to the recommendations. Andrew.
Thank you, Rob. It's 3.16. I must say I found the paper really interesting, and within this one, where they're talking about the A75, A77, where are we with relation to getting this taken forward with regards to the Greenport bid preparation? And what are the deadlines on getting that preparation put in place, ready for submitting?
So I'm not sure we've been furnished with the deadlines just exactly yet, but the indications from the announcement yesterday were that they are going to be pretty tight. I think there was talk about framework publication in March and then brisk progress being required thereafter. I'm not sure that that's been pinned down to dates yet, but that's just my understanding. So I'll check with Steve and David in case they have something hot off the press. But it is going to be quick, I think. Gentlemen, you can add to that?
Through yourself, Chair, that's why I raised the point is, where are we with regards to that? Though? Are we in a strong position to present as and when we do get to know the date, or do we still have a lot of work to do to get us to the position of submitting?
Steve, do you want to take that one?
Chair, yes, happy to update. And I suppose the answer to Councillor Wood's question is yes to both. Yes, we have done a lot of preparatory work, and yes, there will still be a lot of work to do once we know exactly what the timescale is for bid submission. So working through the local partnership members will remember that in November we brought, as part of the Economic Recovery Plan update, a couple of paragraphs just to explain the situation as it then was, but that we were proceeding through that local partnership group to procure some input and support from external consultants to do preparatory work. So that has now been commissioned with one of the partners, one of the private sector partners, P&O, actually taking the lead on commissioning that work. That will provide the foundation for the work that's needed to actually prepare the bid. So that work can't start until the prospectus is published by the government, which we're anticipating will be sometime next month, although at the moment they haven't provided a clear date. Members may be aware of what you're referring to, Councillor Wood, which was the announcement yesterday.
Yeah.
By the joint governments that they have reached agreement on a way forward, which will see free ports in Scotland being developed as green free ports, and also confirming, importantly, that they intend there to be two designations, two places designated in Scotland, which again I think is positive for us. And Chair, I'd be looking, as soon as we get that more detailed update information, to provide that information on to members and also to bring a further report to the March committee.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. The reason I'm pushing on this one is because I have a real deep concern about the capacity within planning to carry out this work. Looking and reading through the report we have in front of us, there's one hell of a work there to get done. Do we have the capacity within your department to carry out this work? And the reason I ask is because the day-to-day work of the planning department is failing miserably at the moment, and I do not want to see projects within this paper failing at the same level. Can you give us an assurance that the capacity will be in place to do both the day-to-day work and carry out what's in this report?
Chair, the input to this work is largely through the economic development team and the policy team, and also working with partner organisations. And as I've said, we're very much pulling in external capacity through external consultants. We've appointed, or P&O have appointed on behalf of the partnership, Ernst & Young, to carry out that detailed work with us. So absolutely, we have built and are continue to build in capacity to deliver the bid. Chair, just to comment on the point made by Councillor Wood there. As I say, this is not something that's going to interfere at all with the day-to-day deliver of the planning service. and whilst the planning service does continue to have some issues in terms of capacity and resource, which has been reported to this committee previously. Those are, by and large, isolated incidents. I wouldn't want members to have the impression that the whole service is failing. There are some isolated areas that we're looking at, and I do intend to bring a report to the March committee on the outcome of a review which is currently underway, looking at areas that perhaps need strengthening within that team. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Andrew, I'm not sure you want to come back.
Thank you, Chair. No, I think that whatever else I have to say with Steve, I'll do that offline, but I appreciate the response that I've had to date. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Just let me check for any further either hands raised or comments. Okay, great. So I was promising to go to the recommendations, but before we do that, I want to ask David for an update on where we're at in terms of business support grants, because clearly things, by nature of the beast, continue to move on, notwithstanding the drafting of any given report. So, David, do you want to just give us an update on where we're at the moment? That would be great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. So I think close of business last night, we did issue an update on the stats on the various schemes that we're currently operating just now. And I just wanted to add, in terms of the taxi driver scheme, which was at the bottom of that table, that's an update in terms of figures. We've invited 256 drivers who we believe may be eligible to apply for the fund of £750. We've received 140 applications so far, and as of close of play last night, we have approved for processing 65 of these, a total value of £48,750. In terms of the operators funds, which is running alongside it, we believe and have issued 138 applications out to operators, and we've received 60 of these back, and 11 at the lower amount of £3,000 and 49, at the higher amount, and 49 at the lower amount of £750. And we've done a stage one kind of review of 36 of these at the moment. So there's still quite a bit of work to go on in there. And what I would add is that we will probably later on this week go back out and contact those people who have not submitted applications to try and make sure that we get as many submitted applications in before the scheme is actually closed. And I say the stats have been provided on the other schemes, and I'm happy to take any questions around any of these particular schemes that members may have.
David, thanks very much. I'm very conscious this has been a huge piece of work for everyone involved. And I'll check for any questions specifically on the business support grants update, please. Archie, yeah.
Yeah, it's just on that very point, Chair, and it's been raised through several of the reports that we've had about staff being moved into support the business grant scheme. And I want to thank, on a more formal basis, David and his team for actually doing what he's done, because if it wasn't for them, half of these business wouldn't have had to, got the grants that they were duly entitled to. So just on behalf of everybody here, I think, David, thanks very much for what your team and that are doing.
Thank you very much. It's appreciated.
Yeah, Archie, very much agree. I think we should append something along those lines to 2.5. And if there are no other questions or comments, can we go to the recommendations? So, members, are we content to note that 2.1, the updates on the economic recovery plan, is detailed at paras 3234 in the report? And at 2.2, can we agree the allocation of 25,000 from the economic recovery budget provision to provide fruitful information and support town centre revitalisation and visitor management across the region? That's as detailed paragraphs 3.5 to 3.10 in the report.
Agreed.
At 2.3, can we agree the allocation of 35,000 from the economic recovery budget to provide business grants to support provision of new motorhome facilities to support the visitor economy, as set out in paragraphs 3.11 to 3.15?
Agreed.
2.4, can we agree the allocation of 20,000 from the economic recovery budget towards a share of the cost of the A75-77 Economic Impact Study jointly commissioned with South Ayrshire Council and Mid and East Antrim Council, as set out in paragraphs 3.16 and 3.17.
Agreed.
Finally, at 2.5, we note and welcome the additional Scottish Government grant funding for businesses as detailed in paragraphs 3.17 to 3.19 in the appendix, noting the progress made in distributing these funds and recording the committee's appreciation of the efforts of officers and staff in processing these important contributions to ensuring businesses are able to survive the pandemic, or perhaps worse to that effect. But I'm sure everyone appreciates the sentiment. Okay, members, thank you for that. David, Steve, thank you very much. We have already attended to item 10, so we will move on to item 11, which is the Property and Buildings Other Asset Class Capital Programme Monitoring Report 21-22, and the report is by Head of Economy and Development. This report provides members with an update on the non-schools property buildings asset class capital programme to the end of December 2021. Paul McCulloch is here to assist members with questions. Paul, before I go to questions, is there anything you'd like to add to the report, please?
Thanks, Chair. Nothing else to add at this time.
Thanks very much, Paul. So I will go straight to members' questions. And I've got Councillor Marshall first. Sean.
Thanks, Chair. I don't know if you remember, but about 6 to 9 months ago, we had a discussion at one of the agenda items. It was with regards to council buildings. And I noticed there's a number of projects on here. It's just because it caught my eye on page 125, the Annan Town Hall external decoration, but there's also another couple of projects for Annan Town Hall. But I think the debate at the time was about unsightly kind of like small plants to large plants to trees grown from council buildings, and also other kind of buildings that are not within the council's ownership on prominent high street locations. Now, what we did agree was that there would be a report back to this committee to look at the potential for the council to use, I think, a HIABs or cherry pickers that they have in their ownership to clean council buildings and to remove these this vegetation. But also we asked in the report to look at the potential for extending that service to businesses on high streets in Dumfries and Annan and other towns. And certainly was a number of buildings in Dumfries that were identified that were council owned. So a couple of questions really is basically, are we going to get that report to see if we can actually, remove this kind of vegetation from council buildings and maybe help businesses on the high street and churches, etc. And the second point is, when we do external works on council buildings, as identified in 3.5 at the bottom of page 125 in Annan, do we actually remove these type of things that are sticking out or protruding from council buildings?
Thanks, Sean. I see Lorna's turned her camera on. Lorna, do you want to comment before I go to Paul?
Yes, I'll let Paul comment on our own buildings in terms of the PPM investments that members have agreed in the summer to deal with some of these issues in our own buildings. Councillor Marshall's indeed correct. We did say we would look at separately those that are in private ownership buildings in town centres and strategic sites that are potentially unsightly, either in current use or vacant at the moment. We will bring that report forward, but that hasn't been able to sort of conclude at this point, but we will bring it forward. And we'd also look within that, Councillor Marshall, about whether we would offer a service or whether we would engage directly with property owners. So there will be options within that. We'll bring that forward to members, but current workloads have not allowed us to progress that to the same extent. And we'll also take cognizance of the work on the vacant and derelict property, because there's an adjacency, I think, to some of those issues that we'll look at there as well. But we will bring that report forward.
Chair, that's fine. I think that's excellent update from Lorna, and I'm glad it's still on the radar. I was just wanting to check because obviously, but I do appreciate there's been other priorities. So thank you for that, Lorna. And as long as it's been attended to and looked at, then I look forward to the report to a future meeting.
That's great. Thanks, Sean. Lorna, thanks. Appreciate the update. I think that's very helpful. Paul, did you want to pick up on the plan preventive maintenance?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, yeah, members have previously approved a budget for planned preventive, which works will be undertaken this financial year coming. We have already undertaken quite a significant amount of work regarding vegetation and other sort of exterior fabric issues over this financial year, and we'll certainly be moving that forward into next. And in Town Hall, as an example of where we've had works undertaken just before Christmas time to remove some vegetation. So the second point of the question, I suppose, was as we undertake work, do we remove vegetation? And the answer to that question is yes. You know, where if you think about Lockerbie Town Hall, there was a significant upgrade or works required to Lockerbie Town Hall, and we took the opportunity at the same time to remove vegetation at a high level. So this is always a challenge, and as we go forward, you know, these things will continue. What we need to do is ensure that our exterior fabric, you know, roofs, walls, windows, etc., are watertight and also vegetation free. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul. Much appreciated. Just let me check for any final questions or comments. I don't see any. Okay, we'll turn to the recommendations. Members, at 2.1, can we note the financial and physical project of projects within the asset class? That's as reflected in the appendix.
Okay.
At 2.2, can we agree the project variances across the programme? That's as identified also in the appendix.
Okay.
At 2.3, can we agree new projects across the North Schools estate as detailed in paragraph 3.5.1? Okay. And that these will be funded from the unallocated Yeah. Okay. Are we content to agree that? There is a word missing there, I think. But I think it is clear what we're attempting to do with that. Okay, thanks, members. So we'll move on, and thank you, Paul, to item 12.
Thank you.
Which is the ICT Business Systems Asset Class Capital Programme 21-22 Monitoring Report. This report provides members with an update on the ICT Asset Class Capital Programme, again, as at the end of December 2021. Graham McAlorum is here to assist if members have any questions. Graham, is there anything you'd like to add before we go to questions, please?
Chair, nothing at this time, thank you.
Graham, thanks very much. Members, any questions or comments on Graham's report, please? Archie.
Yeah, thanks very much, Graham. It's just a bit of clarity on it. The 3.8 says quite clearly to compensate for the anticipated underspend caused by the delays. I mean, are we any sort of more secure in that will be an underspend rather than being an anticipated one?
Thanks, Archie. Graham.
Through yourself, Chair. Yes, it will be an underspend. The reason it was anticipated at the time of the report was that we were still expecting the opportunity to be able to have devices delivered before the end of the financial year. That's no longer likely to occur. So yes, the underspend, it will be a definite underspend.
Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. Thank you, Archie. Ivor.
I'm not sure if this is the right place or not, but it's just to do with if you can actually move the budget about if needed, because my understanding is currently within planning there are issues of accessing the back office digitally from home, and that's been slowing down some of the processes. Is there something that you would do through capital expenditure, or would that be more a revenue expenditure where you could actually maybe tweak something to allow officers to actually access some of the back office systems from home?
Thanks, Ivor. Graham?
Chair, We are aware that we are experiencing some slowness in the network at the moment, and that's affecting some of the remote access type connections. We are working to address that. There's work scheduled for, in fact, next week to reduce that, and we're rolling out a new remote access client, which should remove that kind of delay in some of the connectivity. So yes, we are aware. It was caused by a previous upgrade to one of the pieces of software, and we didn't anticipate it. So we are addressing it, and hopefully it should be resolved in the next, hopefully next week or the week after.
Thanks, Graham. See a thumbs up from Ivor. That's great. Thank you. If there are no further questions or comments, turn to the recommendations. So members, 2.1, can we note the physical and financial progress of projects as at 31st December within the ICT business system asset class, and that's reflected in the appendix.
Noted.
2.2, can we agree the acceleration of £60,000 for the schools mobile network as per paragraph 3.8 to compensate for the delays elsewhere in the programme?
Agreed.
Agreed. That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you, members. Thank you, Graham. So I have no urgent business, and therefore want to thank you all for your attendance and input today, which is much appreciated. I will see you in March. Thank you all.